The room went quiet the moment she walked in. Not the polite kind of quiet that falls over a crowd when someone important enters. This was the other kind. The sharp, airless stillness of a room catching its breath, and it spread from table to table like something spilled. The Hartwell Gala was the kind of event that only existed in certain zip codes. Crystal chandeliers dripping light over ivory tablecloths. Men in tuxedos who wore them like skin. Women in gowns that cost more than most people's cars. The Children's Education Foundation held it every October at the Fontaine Grand in Chicago, and for the past 3 years, Tobias Hale had attended as one of its most celebrated donors. Tonight, he sat at table 1, closest to the stage,
with his arm draped around Cassandra
Brine, his PR consultant, his companion, and the woman he had begun escorting to every event, 6 weeks after he told his wife their marriage was over. He was mid-law at something. Cassandra whispered when the shift happened. The room tilted. Tobias turned, the way everyone turned, pulled by some instinct older than manners. And there, ascending the stage steps toward the podium, was Maya Sutton Hale, his ex-wife, the woman he had left in a 2-bedroom rental with their daughter's college fund, nearly drained, and a stack of joint debt she didn't know existed. Walking beside Reginald Ashworth, chairman of the Ashworth Institute, the man who had quietly funded more than 40 public school systems across the country, a man whose name alone made board members straighten in their chairs. Maya wore a deep burgundy gown, simple and clean, and she moved with the kind of stillness that doesn't come from confidence learned in a class. It comes from having nothing left to lose and then finding something worth protecting. She didn't scan the room. She didn't look for him. She simply walked, her hand resting lightly in the crook of Reginald's arm, and when the lights above the stage caught her, she looked like someone the evening had been organized around. Tobias's champagne glass hovered halfway to his mouth. Cassandra said something. He didn't hear it. Because Maya, the woman he had written off as too soft, too ordinary, too attached to a version of life he had outgrown, that woman was shaking Reginald Ashworth's hand on a stage while the room applauded. And Tobias Hale, for the first time in 2 years, felt the cold, specific sensation of a man who has made a catastrophic and irreversible mistake. 8 months earlier, Maya's life had looked nothing like a gala. It had looked like Tuesday at 6 a.m., with her alarm going off before the sun came up, a pot of coffee that wasn't quite strong enough, and the particular weight of a house that used to hold more people than it currently did. She had been a music teacher for 11 years. First at Jefferson Middle School on the south side of Chicago, then at Harrington Academy, a private school that paid significantly better, but asked for significantly more. She had a gift for it, the kind that students carried with them for years after they graduated. Parents wrote letters. Former students sent emails. One girl she had taught at 14 was now playing violin professionally in Baltimore, and she still called Maya every December. But gifts don't always translate into leverage, and Maya had spent the last decade making choices that quietly erased her own. She had quit teaching 2 years into her marriage at Tobias's suggestion. "You're carrying too much," he had said, in that careful way he had of framing things as concern when they were actually instructions. "I'm doing well enough. You should be home with Lily. She needs you more than those kids do." She had believed him. She had loved him. And so she had stepped back from the classroom, from the one place she had always felt entirely herself, and redirected everything she had into supporting the life he was building. Tobias was 34 when he founded Hale EdTech, a software company that created digital learning platforms for K-12 schools. Maya had helped him write the original pitch deck at their kitchen table, had introduced him to her principal and 2 board members she knew from years of school galas, had helped him articulate what teachers actually needed from a product, because she had been one. She had co-signed the first business loan because his credit history had a gap he never explained. She had managed the household, managed their daughter, managed everything invisible while he managed everything with his name on it. By the time Hale EdTech went public, her name wasn't on anything at all. That was the thing about Tobias. He was never cruel in ways that left marks you could point to. He was generous with money until he wasn't. He was present until his company became the center of gravity. And when he began pulling away, he did it the way you move furniture in the middle of the night, a few inches at a time, until one morning Maya looked up and nothing was where it used to be. She found out about Cassandra on a Saturday. She had gone to his office to bring him lunch, something she almost never did anymore. But Lily had wanted to see where Daddy worked, and Maya had packed sandwiches and thought maybe the gesture would unstick something between them. She used the access code he still hadn't changed. She took the elevator to the 14th floor. She heard voices behind the glass wall of the conference room. She didn't say anything. She didn't cry, not then. She stood in the hallway of the building her introduction to a school board had helped build, and she understood, with a terrible clarity, that she had been doing the math wrong for a very long time. That night, after Lily was asleep, Tobias sat across from her at the kitchen table and told her the truth. Not all of it, but enough. "This isn't working," he said. "You know it isn't." "I didn't know until today," she said. He had the grace to look uncomfortable. Not sorry, uncomfortable. "I should have said something sooner. You should have done a lot of things sooner." He wanted her to argue. She could tell from the way he sat, braced and ready, that he had prepared for her to break down or raise her voice, that he had some version of this conversation preloaded where he was reasonable. And she was emotional. She didn't give it to him. She just looked at him, and eventually he looked away. 3 weeks later, she moved out of the house she had not signed the mortgage for and into a 2-bedroom rental 40 minutes from Lily's school. The settlement was clean. Tobias's lawyers were thorough, and so was his accountant. By the time Maya understood what she was signing, she had already signed it. She didn't have a lawyer of her own. She couldn't afford one fast enough, and she had trusted, God, she had trusted, that the father of her child would not deliberately take advantage of that. He had, though, quietly, efficiently, the way he did most things. She was left with child support, a portion of the savings account Tobias had already drawn down, and a rental she could technically afford if she went back to work immediately. So she went back to work. The problem was that 11 years had passed. The music education world had not stood still. Standards had changed, platforms had changed, the whole ecosystem had shifted while she had been standing outside of it. She applied to 14 schools in the first month. She got 3 interviews. She got 1 offer, a part-time position at a community center that paid $12 an hour. She took it, and she started building from there. She didn't talk about it much. Not to her sister, who would have worried in ways that cost Maya energy she didn't have. Not to her friends, most of whom had quietly sorted themselves to Tobias's side of the ledger once the company's success became undeniable. Not to Lily, who was 8 years old and needed her mother to be steady more than she needed her, to be honest about how unsteady everything actually was. At night, after the dishes and the homework and the reading and the tucking in, Maya would sit at her kitchen table and work. She had an old curriculum she had developed years ago. A structured music literacy program she had used at Jefferson and refined over a decade of teaching. And she began digitizing it, organizing it, turning it into something transferable. She didn't know what she was going to do with it. She just needed to do something with her hands that felt like building instead of surviving. That was how she ended up at the Midwest Education Summit in March. She had registered on a discount rate available to independent educators, which she now technically was. She went to present a panel discussion on music literacy in under-resourced schools. 12 people came. One of them asked a question at the end that went on for 4 minutes and was really just a statement, but another one stayed after. He was older. Late 60s, she guessed, silver-haired and patient in the way that people who have spent decades in rooms full of noise eventually become. He introduced himself simply, "Reginald Ashworth. I found your session interesting." She recognized the name. She tried not to show it. "Thank you," she said. "I wasn't sure anyone would." He smiled. "Your framework isn't new, but the application is. And the piece about teacher retention, that's something we've been struggling to quantify for years." She had not expected to talk for 45 minutes, but they had. He wasn't looking for leverage. He wasn't there to offer her a rescue. He was there because he ran an institution that spent millions trying to improve public education outcomes. And he had just sat in a room and listened to someone who actually understood why music mattered to kids who were failing everything else. He asked if she would consider consulting for a program they were developing. She said she would think about it. She thought about it for 1 day. Then she called him back and said yes. The next 6 months changed her life, not because of anything dramatic, but because of something much quieter. For the first time in years, she was being asked what she thought. Reginald introduced her to researchers, to district superintendents, to curriculum designers who had been working on problems she had been thinking about alone in her rental apartment. She sat in rooms where people treated her expertise as a resource instead of a background detail. She wrote a 40-page curriculum proposal that Reginald's team used to secure a grant from the state of Illinois. Her name was on it. She was so unused to that she read it 3 times to make sure. She was not naive. She understood that Reginald had other consultants, other priorities, other relationships that mattered more. She understood that she was one piece of something larger and that her role could change. But she also understood, for the first time in a long time, that she had something worth protecting, and that understanding changed how she stood. Tobias, in those same 6 months, had been doing what successful men who leave marriages often do. He had gotten louder. Hale EdTech expanded into 4 new markets. His picture appeared in 2 national business publications. He donated to causes publicly and photographically. He and Cassandra were seen at events. He gave interviews where he spoke about innovation and legacy, and the importance of building something that outlasts you. Maya read one of them by accident, on her phone at 11 o'clock at night, and felt the particular exhaustion of watching someone perform a version of your shared life that erases you from it. She put her phone down. She went back to work. She did not know that Tobias had started paying attention to what she was doing. She did not know that one of his board members had mentioned the Ashworth Institute to him in a context that included her name. She did not know that Tobias Hale, who had once told her she was too attached to her classroom identity to see the bigger picture, had begun to feel something that he did not yet have the honesty to name. She was just doing the work. That was the thing about rising from the bottom of something real. It doesn't look like rising. It looks like Tuesday. It looks like another draft, another meeting, another night at the kitchen table long after Lily is asleep. It looks like ordinary until suddenly it doesn't. The night of the Hartwell Gala, Maya almost hadn't gone. Reginald had put her name forward for the Foundation's Emerging Educator Award, an honor given annually to someone making a measurable difference in access to arts education. She had received the notification in an email she almost deleted, because she thought it was spam. She had sat with it for 3 days before telling anyone. When she did tell her sister cried. Maya didn't. She felt something stranger than proud. She felt recognized. As in, something in her that had been invisible for a very long time had been seen. She almost backed out twice. She didn't own anything appropriate to wear to an event like the Fontaine Grand. She wasn't sure she could afford to. She wasn't sure she belonged in a room like that. Her sister showed up at her apartment on a Saturday morning with 2 dresses borrowed from a friend and a very clear opinion about which one Maya should wear. She helped her with her hair. She made her practice walking in the heels. She told her, with a firmness that did not invite argument, "You are going, and you are going to stand there like you built that stage." Maya went. She did not know Tobias would be there. She only found out when Reginald met her in the lobby and mentioned, carefully, that Hale EdTech was listed as a bronze sponsor. He said it without editorializing. He simply gave her the information and watched her face to see what she would do with it. She breathed. "Okay," she said. "You don't have to go near his table," Reginald said. "I know." She straightened. "Let's go in." She didn't look for Tobias when they entered. She didn't scan the room. She kept her eyes forward and let the evening arrange itself around her. The way you do when you've learned that the worst things rarely announce themselves and the good things rarely need your help arriving. She didn't see him until she was already walking toward the stage, and by then it was too late for either of them to pretend the other wasn't there. The applause when her name was called was louder than she expected. She stood at the podium with the award in her hands, a simple glass piece, not heavy but not light, and she looked out at 300 people and said what she meant, which was this: that every child who had ever sat in a music class and felt, maybe for the first time, that there was something in the world that made sense to them, those children were the reason this work mattered. That access to beauty was not a luxury, that it was, in fact, the infrastructure, that she was honored to be doing work that some people still thought of as decorative, but that she had seen, with her own eyes, hold kids together when nothing else could. She thanked Reginald. She thanked the foundation. She thanked her daughter, who was at home with a babysitter, and had made Maya promise to save the glass piece so she could put it on the shelf. She did not look at table 1, but she felt it, the particular weight of being watched by someone who once thought they knew exactly what you were worth. After the ceremony, Reginald guided her through the room with the ease of someone who had spent 50 years at events like this. People introduced themselves. They mentioned her presentation. They asked about her program. A woman from the Chicago Department of Education handed her a card and said she'd been hoping to meet her. 2 foundation directors asked if she had time next month to sit down with their teams. Maya said yes to all of it. She was standing near the window, talking to a school superintendent from Evanston, when Tobias appeared. He didn't come with Cassandra. He came alone, the way men come when they want a conversation that feels private, and he stood at the edge of her sight line until the superintendent excused herself. Then he stepped forward. "Maya," he said. She looked at him. He had not changed much. A little thinner, maybe. The kind of haircut that money made easier. He was wearing a watch she didn't recognize, which meant it was new, which meant things were going well for him. She filed that away without feeling much about it. "Tobias," she said. He was quiet for a moment, which was unusual. Tobias was not a man who allowed silence to exist without filling it. He started. "Thank you," she said before he could finish. She did not want his version of her evening. She did not want his adjective in front of her accomplishment. He stopped. He tried again. "You look good," he said, which was true and also not the point, and they both knew it. "I am good," she said. Also true. He looked down at his glass. "I didn't know you were working with Ashworth. You didn't ask." There was a pause long enough to hold everything that had happened in the last 2 years. The kitchen table conversation, the lawyers. The morning she had packed Lily's things into the car and driven away from a house with her fingerprints all over it. "I've been thinking," he said finally, "about some of the decisions I made." Maya didn't respond. He paused. "I underestimated what we had, what you contributed." It was not an apology. It was the version of an apology that a man gives when he wants credit for the self-awareness without having to actually reckon with the damage. Maya had heard enough of those from enough of the parents she had dealt with over her years in schools to recognize the shape of it immediately. "I know you did," she said. He blinked. "And I think part of you knew too," she continued, "which is why you made sure I didn't have a lawyer when we signed the settlement." He opened his mouth, closed it. She shifted her glass to her other hand. "I'm not angry at you, Tobias. I was. But I'm not now. I just want to be honest with you, since we're here." She looked at him directly. "What you did cost me a lot, you know that. And I rebuilt anyway. And I'm going to keep rebuilding." She paused. "But that's not because of anything you did. It's in spite of it." The room hummed around them. Somewhere near the bar, Cassandra Brine was watching, her expression carefully assembled into something neutral. Tobias looked at Maya the way people look at something they dropped and watched break, understanding only after the fact that it was fragile. "I know," he said finally, quietly. "Good," Maya said. "Then we can both move forward." She excused herself, and she did not look back. Reginald was waiting near the door with her coat. He didn't ask what happened. He just handed her the coat and walked with her toward the exit, and she was grateful, in a way that had nothing to do with romance or rescue, for the simple fact of someone who knew when to simply be present. In the car afterward, she sat quietly for a moment. Then she took her phone out and texted Lily's babysitter. "On my way home. 20 minutes. She put the phone away. She looked out the window at Chicago moving past her in the dark, and she thought about all the ways a life could be taken apart and put back together. Not the same way. Never the same way. But sometimes better. Sometimes with the bad parts removed and something truer in their place. What followed in the months after the gala was not dramatic. There were no courtrooms, no explosive confrontations, no moment where everything reversed itself with the satisfying click of a story resolving. Real life doesn't work that way, and Maya had stopped expecting it to. What happened instead was this. People kept calling. The Chicago Department of Education reached out in November and asked Maya to pilot her curriculum in 6 schools on the South Side. She said yes. She spent 3 months preparing materials, training the music teachers who would implement it, building assessments that could actually measure what they were looking at. She worked more hours than she had worked in years, and she went to sleep exhausted in a way that felt, for the first time, productive. In January, the results from the first semester came back. Measurable improvement in reading scores among students who had participated in the program. Not a miracle, not a silver bullet, but real, documented, defensible evidence that what she had built worked. Reginald's team published a brief analysis. Her name was on it. A reporter from the Chicago Tribune called. She did the interview. It ran on a Wednesday. Her photo was above the fold in the education section. She bought 3 copies. She gave one to Lily, who cut out her picture and taped it to the inside of her school folder. Around that same time, she heard through a mutual contact that Hale EdTech was struggling. Not catastrophically. Tobias was too careful for catastrophe. But one of their flagship products had underperformed in a new market, and 2 members of his leadership team had left within the same quarter. The stock had dipped. His board was asking questions. Maya heard this and felt nothing in particular. Not satisfaction, not guilt. Just the neutral acknowledgement of information, the way you receive news about weather in a city you don't live in anymore. She heard also that Cassandra Brine had ended her professional contract with Hale EdTech shortly after the gala. The professional severance and the personal one, as far as anyone could tell, had followed close behind. She heard this with the same neutral acknowledgement. It was not her concern. She had a curriculum to revise, a pilot to expand, a daughter who needed help with her long division, and a kitchen table she had, over the past year, made entirely her own. She did not think about Tobias often. But when she did, she noticed that the quality of those thoughts had changed. The anger she used to carry, the specific burning anger of a woman who has been taken advantage of by someone she trusted, had not disappeared, exactly. It had been converted. It was in the program now. It was in the hours she worked, in rooms full of people who had the power to fund what she was building. She had found, to her own surprise, that she was very good at being in those rooms. She had spent 11 years standing in front of children and figuring out, quickly, and with almost no resources, how to reach them, how to get them to listen, how to make something complicated feel possible. Those were not skills that evaporated. They had just been waiting for a room that could use them. In March, almost exactly 1 year after the Education Summit where she had first met Reginald, the Ashworth Institute offered her a formal position, Director of Curriculum Innovation, a title she had to read twice, a salary that made her sit down. She called her sister. Her sister cried again. Maya cried this time too, quietly, into the phone, while her sister said things like, "I always knew, and you deserved this years ago, and I'm going to need you to let me take you to dinner." She took the job. She did not call Tobias. She did not send him the article the Tribune ran about her new appointment, which a colleague forwarded to her with the subject line, "You might want to see this." She read it and felt the strange vertigo of seeing her own life described by someone who had only just started paying attention. She thought about what she had said to him at the gala, about moving forward. She meant it. She was. The last time she saw him was at a pickup, outside Lily's school, on a Thursday afternoon. He was there to get Lily for the weekend, and Maya pulled up at the same time because she had forgotten a permission slip that needed his signature. They stood on the sidewalk in the thin March cold and passed a pen back and forth and talked about Lily's upcoming spring recital, which Lily had already told them both approximately 40 times she wanted them both to attend. "She's been practicing every night," Maya said. "I know. She plays me the recordings," Tobias said, and he sounded genuinely proud. He looked for a moment like the man she had married, before the company and the money and the long slide away from everything they had intended. "She's really good," he said. "She is," Maya agreed. They stood in that for a moment. Then Lily came through the doors with her backpack half-zipped, and her jacket open, and her face lit up at the sight of both of them. And the conversation between the adults ended in the way that most important things between them ended now. Quietly, without ceremony, absorbed into the business of continuing. Maya watched Lily climb into Tobias's car. She watched the car pull away. She stood on the sidewalk for a moment longer than necessary, her hands in her pockets, the permission slip signed and unnecessary now, tucked under her arm. She thought about a lot of things. She thought about the kitchen she had in her rental, which she had slowly, over the past year, made feel like hers. The good cutting board she finally bought, the plant she hadn't killed, the photo of her and Lily at the lakeshore that she had framed and put above the sink where she would see it every morning. She thought about her office at the Ashworth Institute, which she was still getting used to. The fact of having an office at all, the particular pleasure of a door with her name on it. She thought about Lily, who had her father's stubbornness and her mother's ear, and who would sit at the piano and play the same 4 bars over and over until they were exactly right, and who had no idea how much of that came from watching her mother do the same thing. She turned and walked back to her car. She had a meeting in an hour, a call with a superintendent from Rockford who wanted to talk about the program. She had a proposal to finish by Friday. She had dinner to make and a recital to prepare for, and a life that asked more of her than it used to and gave more back in return. She wasn't who she had been 2 years ago. That woman had been loved and taken for granted and slowly made smaller, the way you make things smaller to fit in a space they were never meant to occupy. But spaces change. People leave and take the walls with them. And sometimes what you thought was a ceiling turns out to have been someone else's floor. Maya Sutton had been a music teacher for 11 years. She was going to be one again in a different way, in a room she had helped to build. She got in the car. She turned the key. She drove toward what was next. And just like that, she was no longer someone's afterthought. She was the whole story.